Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, and I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! Today for you, I have a quilted strip heart card. I made a card design not that long ago that looked like a quilted panel, and it kind of inspired me to search up some more designs that looked like quilts. And I found a group on Facebook and someone shared this simple heart card. It's perfect because Valentine's Day is coming up very soon here, and this is super easy to make. And I'm actually going to show you a trick that I came up with that I think makes it go together even a little faster. So we're going to make this card today. The stamp sets that I am using are the Hearts of Elegance, which was one of our online exclusives. And then Be My Valentine. That's just a little accent heart here. But I mentioned those online exclusives because they're online products only. Our catalog can be viewed online. That's all the catalogs and the exclusive items, of which we have been churning out some fantastic ones. So be sure to check that out. If you are like me and you're a paper catalog kind of person, please feel free to reach out to me. You can mention in the comments that you would like a catalog. I will ask you to then email me your address or message me on Facebook your address rather than post online. I don't want you to do that, but I'd be happy to send you a catalog in the mail so that you can drool over it along right with me. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to need is either a piece of grid paper or copy paper will work as well. This is 3 3/4 of an inch square. So the original designer used grid paper. Graph paper would probably work as well. And I think they were thinking you want to be able to line up your paper perfectly. You can do that if you want, by all means, but I found a way I think that works a little bit faster because we're going to be covering this entire square of grid paper with strips of paper. This is going to be the heart that we're going to put on the front of the card. So you don't necessarily need to line them up straight. Let's go ahead, we'll talk about the next step and you'll see what I mean. So we are going to take some strips of designer series paper, or DSP as we call them in Stampin' Land. And I'm gonna put this under my paper so you can see a little better here. We need 5 strips that are 3/4 of an inch wide and 3 3/4 of an inch tall. And you'll see I have 2, 2, and 1. And that is because we have 1 strip that is our center point, and then 2 pieces on the outside of that center strip, and then 2 more to make the outer edges of the card. So 2, 2, and 1. Just realized the top of my heart's a little bit off, but it's okay. Barely noticeable. So 5 strips, 3 prints, 2, 2, and 1. And I like to lay them out in the order I want them to go on the card. So I think I'll do it this way. If you have directional paper, make sure you cut it accordingly. So I like to lay out my cards and then, or my strips of paper, and then we're gonna glue them to this piece to start forming our heart. Now the lady that designed the original card took her center strip, figured out the center point, and laid it down on the graph paper. And then she worked her way out. I did that for my first card, and there was no problem with it. But I realized if we're covering up the whole sheet of paper, do I really need to focus that much on the center point? So here is my little tip for you that I think just makes it go a little bit faster than having to figure out that center point. Use whatever adhesive you like best. I'm a tape runner girl. I tend to make a mess with glue, but it's up to you if you want to have a little more flexibility to move the paper. If you're not confident in laying them on straight, by all means use the liquid glue. But I'm just going to take our Stampin' Seal. I'm going to go around the edges here. If you do use liquid glue, remember the rule, dot, dot, not a lot. You don't want glue seeping everywhere because we are going to run this through an embossing folder once we have it together. And I would hate to see you have glue everywhere. That's one reason I don't use glue on these things. So what I did was I used my Stampin' Seal. I went around the edges. I made an X and then a plus sign. So I have enough glue that my paper's not going to peel off, but that it will stick down nicely. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the first strip. I work left to right typically, but pick one of your outer ends and work in whichever direction you want. I'm gonna line up the bottom corner and make sure this is on straight and give it a press. Taking the second strip, I'm gonna butt it right up against it. You have just enough of a lip, you can do that, and press down. As I said, we're covering the whole paper, so I figure I'm working smarter, not harder, than making myself do math to figure out the center point. And so your last one should fit right on here. Now I did a pretty good job here with this, but give it a little press. If you flip it over and you have a little overhang on the edges, it's okay. If it's uneven, you might want to square it off. I had one earlier, like this strip might be just a smidgen taller than the rest. I'm not going to worry about that. I did one of my samples where it was a little bit more noticeable. I must not have cut it quite right, and I just cut it across and made it even, and then continued. It doesn't change the measurements or anything like that. So just something to keep in mind if you want to square that up. Okay, so next you will need a pencil and a ruler, or my other tip is kind of a little cheat sheet of sorts. So you could definitely take a ruler and measure this, but I was making more than one of these cards. So I had a strip of the graph paper that had a ruler right on it. So I went ahead, I folded it in half and then marked my center point. And then I also marked it at 3/4 of an inch. And that's gonna help us do the math to create our heart shape. So I'm not going to mark the top. If you wanna mark the top, you can, 3/4 of an inch in from either side. The reason I chose not to mark it was because my strips are 3/4 of an inch wide. And so I just know my top cuts will need to start at the junction between the first and second panels. You'll see what I mean when we get to cutting. So I'm gonna rotate once, and I'm gonna hold my little cheat sheet here and take my pencil, and I'm gonna mark at 3/4 of an inch and the halfway mark. Just tiny little pencil marks that I can see. Then I'm gonna rotate, so this will be the bottom of the heart, and here I just need to mark the center point. Then I'm gonna rotate to the last side, and here I'm gonna mark the halfway point, and then I'm gonna slide it up here to where I can mark the 3/4 of an inch on this side as well. So when you are finished, you will have a mark 3/4 of an inch down, and then the halfway point on each side, and then the halfway point at the middle. Again, you can mark the top if you want, totally your call. Now we're going to pull out our paper trimmer score and do a little bit of cutting. So the first thing you're going to do is cut a small triangle. So from the 3/4 of an inch on the top, so where that strip meets the second one, to the 3/4 of an inch down. So basically you're taking a little tiny corner off. So I'm just gonna line up the junction of the paper with my pencil mark. And I am gonna press just a little bit deeper than I would normally since it's 2 layers of paper. So you have a little triangle to cut off. Next, we're going to go from the halfway point on the side down to the halfway point at the bottom. This will leave you with a bigger corner, and it's up to you if you want to save these for another project or toss them. I'm going to show you a quick project at the end, an example. Now this next cut, it looks scary because you have such an angle here. When you go to cut this next one, even though you're cutting the same exact angle in the opposite direction, it looks so very different. Don't be afraid. So that is from the bottom to halfway, the halfway point on that last side. Again, it comes out perfectly, but when you've got that lined up in your paper cutter, it does not look right at all. I have to tell you, every time. And then our last cut is taking this other small corner off, so my pencil mark to the juncture in the paper. And there we go. And I'll put this here so you can see it a little better. If you turn it upside down, it kind of looks like a gemstone, or I kind of think it looks like a certain chocolate. that's wrapped in silver wrapping, right? So that would be fun to do in silver glimmer paper and give it a little ribbon. But that's how you know you have the right shape, is if it looks like an upside down or a gemstone or a Hershey Kiss. But if you flip it back up, you can see our heart shape. I'm gonna take a moment and an eraser and just kind of make sure I can't see any of those pencil marks. And you might be thinking, hey, you forgot the notch at the top. I'm gonna show you a cheat for that particular piece. So we're gonna take a 1-inch square of basic white cardstock and cut it diagonal, corner to corner. So that will leave you with a little triangle like so. This we are going to glue. So I turn mine sideways just so I can get a better visual. You could use glue dots on this, you could use liquid glue, but the long edge is gonna go on the top of your heart, and you wanna center it in that center strip. Whoop. And I think, let me see, mine's just a little bit off. I must be, there we go, that looks better. All right, so I'm kind of matching point to point here, but you just line it up and give it a good press, and now you can see how our heart is forming. And the next step is to take a basic white piece of cardstock. This is 3 3/4 inch square, so it's the same size as that grid paper that we started with. And I can't remember if I mentioned it or not. You're not stuck with grid paper if you don't have grid paper at home. Since these strips cover the entirety, I just started using blank copy paper. I didn't want to use cardstock because I didn't want it to be thick. We are going to be running this through an embossing folder, and you really don't have to have anything thicker than a piece of either graph paper or copy paper. So don't panic if you don't have graph paper, it's okay. So now what I'm going to do is just put some adhesive on the back here. And then I usually measure not measure, but match up the top and the sides and then press. And this is our heart panel. Now, I have just the slightest little overhang here. This is probably one of the smaller ones that I've had. If you have any overhang and it's troubling you, go ahead and cut it off. Just take a pair of scissors and snip it and then get rid of those pieces. And here is our heart panel. Now this is perfectly lovely, but we want it to have that quilted look. So if you don't have an embossing folder, don't fret. Just go ahead and finish the card without this next step. But if you do have an embossing machine, go ahead and get that out. So I'm going to bring my cut and emboss machine on camera. It is a little hard to see, I apologize. But this is our cut and emboss machine, the full-size one. One thing I love about it is the plates that come with it have the directions right on it, so it tells you your recipe for whether you're die cutting, embossing with a thin or a thick folder. So I'm using one of our Basics 3D embossing folders. This was an online exclusive set of 3. It is one of the thicker ones. So I'm just going to open it up, and there is a line on one side of it, and I label mine so I know which ones they are. I can't keep all those names straight. But I'm going to just line my paper up along the line so I know it's straight in the machine. And I close it. I'm going to flip it so my hinge goes into the machine first. I'm going to add the thick plate, which is what I need for 3D embossing folders. And I'm going to stagger them a little bit and then roll this through the machine. I apologize. Ooh, sometimes it creates a little earthquake on my crafting table. It wasn't too bad tonight. And then I take apart my sandwich. And when I take the panel out of the embossing folder, and this step is why I don't use the liquid glue, because I would have had it exploding everywhere. I tend to be a little adhesive happy. Can you see the pretty quilt design? And this kind of condenses everything, it compacts it, makes sure those papers are glued down nice and tight, and just gives it a really nice look. So let's go ahead and finish the card. To finish the heart panel, we're gonna mat it on a 4-inch square. Now I could pop this piece up on dimensionals, or I could put dimensionals on the back of this piece. I'm going to glue these together flat and then pop it on dimensionals when I put it on the card front in a moment. But it's up to you whether you want to glue the whole thing flat or add as much dimension as you like. There you go. Our card base tonight is basic white. This is 8.5 by 5.5, scored down the middle. So our panel for the front of the card is only 4.25 inches wide, so you don't have a lot of wiggle room with this particular layout. You can put your sentiment down here at the bottom, which is what I'm going to do, but I'm going to show you a couple different ideas in my samples that you might want to give a try. Now I'm just going to lay my panel here so I see my spacing. I have cherry cobbler ink. I don't know if I ever told you, but that is cherry cobbler that I used as my mat. And I'm just going to stamp here at the bottom, like so. Now I have my envelope. I like to let my ink sit for just a minute. It does not take a lot of dry time, but inevitably, if I don't let it sit for a second, I will smear it. So I'm going to go ahead and add my heart accents to the envelope. And now I'm ready to go ahead and flip this to the inside. And I have my Happy Valentine's Day stamp. There we are. And 2 more little accent hearts. And we will be ready to put the card together. Okay. Now, one reason I don't glue the panel on first is because if I had smeared the inside of the card, I would have had to start over. This way, no harm, no foul. I'm ready to go ahead and attach it when I'm ready. So I'm going to put dimensionals on the back of this piece. The backings come off. Make sure you have your card positioned appropriately. I almost glued one on sideways in a rush earlier, so make sure your heart and your words match. And then just attach that. And to finish, I have some of our pretty adhesive-backed heart sequins. These are nice shiny bling. I thought they pulled the gold out of the paper. This one doesn't have a whole lot of gold, but you can still see it. And it's up to you. You could put your embellishments on the heart panel, or I'm going to go ahead and put mine down around the sentiment, but you'll see some different versions on other samples in just a second here. So there we go. There is our quilted strip heart card. So let me show you some more samples. I mentioned that you don't have a lot of room, but you have a couple more options for putting the card together. So if you've ever heard of a book binding card, that is this style here where I have an extra score line on the front and then I glued the card together. So this is not the same card or style of card base. This is what I call the hamburger style, kind of long and flat. And then if you want to do the book binding card, you need to do the long skinny one. So that would be 4.25 by 11. And then you would score the long side at 4.25 and 5.5. And so then your card would still fold in the middle, but you would have this little flap created and you just glue this down. I added ribbon here for a nice accent and a little piece of designer series paper. And that leaves me with the 4.25 inch square as my interior for the card. There is another video on the YouTube channel with the bookbinding technique, if you haven't checked that out already. Now this is obviously great for Valentine's. I left the sentiment off the front on this one, but I had a lot of fun picking papers to do this design with, and this does work for other occasions. Maybe not everyone, and I wouldn't make a masculine card with this, but this one was so bright and cheery, I decided it needed to be a birthday card. Here I'm using our current Starburst embossing folder. We have an incentive going on right now in February 2025, which is for every $60 and $120 you purchase, you get to pick a free item. The Starburst embossing folder is one of them, and if you're curious about that, that, you can check that out online at my website. That runs till the end of February 2025. But that Starburst embossing folder is a great quilted look as well. And I didn't mention, but this one, the bookbinding, this other bookbinding card, I used the metal plate. So a little bit different, but I still thought it was a nice quilted look. All right, moving on. So this was the bookbinding fold, but you can also just take the card and create the horizontal or landscape orientation and skip the bookbinding part. So here I just made the design work for me, putting it off to one side and then adding a simple sentiment strip. And there's another fun birthday card. I loved all these floral papers. They work so well together. Here I went with the yellow paper. I can't remember the name of this, but it is in our new mini catalog that runs till the end of April, I believe. Again, a birthday card. Here I added some stamped accents. I put bling on the card, on the heart and around it. And then there is the inside. And then I made an anniversary card as well. This one I think is my favorite. I love how the pool party kind of pops and really accents the yellows. And then I mentioned that if you're making several of these cards, you'll have a pile of scraps like this. And I hate to throw anything out, and so I thought, I wonder if I could make something with these larger ones. So I just wanted to share really quick a scrap card that I put together with, oops, it's upside down, some of the pieces from those yellow cards. They were so bright and happy, I hated to pitch them. So we'll have to see if I make anything with these red ones. That would be a fun little Valentine. And here I simply used a strip of cardstock, lined up those triangles, stamped, and then ran it through the embossing folder. This is one of our subtle or crosshair embossing folders. It's another one in the basic set. And then there's a happy little birthday card. So I just love it. I thought that was quick and clever. So thank you for much. Okay, let me try that again. Thank you so much for watching this video and checking out the quilted strip heart card. If you have not already subscribed here, I would love for you to do so, and you could click the notification bell and get a little ding each time a video is put up here on the page. Also, if you are a Facebook fan, I am there as the Faithful Stamper. You can catch me live there usually once a week. I do offer some different incentives, like giveaway cards with each video I do live there on the page. I talk more about specials that Stampin' Up! Has to offer. So if you're interested, I would be happy to have you there as part of that community. If you don't have a demonstrator you're currently working with, I'd be happy to get a paper catalog to you. Just reach out to me and let me know if you would like to have one. All right, thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy crafting.